me, pretty much sounds are about what I hear in my head. It's about getting out these things that are bumping around and trying to find ways to do it, whether it's through the sound, whether it's through my sound effects, my amp, my VST plugins, my editing capabilities in my DAW, whatever it is. If it sounds good to me, then it is good. At the end of the day, what I always discover, and I have made and spent so much money on different guitars chasing sounds, invariably it always comes back to your hands. How you sound is how you play your guitar, and how much practice you put in and how much time you spend chasing those sounds that you hear in your head. The rest is almost just like colours for those, but nonetheless you'll keep chasing those colours like I do, I'm sure. When you're planning your rhythm tracks and working your tones, quite often you'll find that as you start adding your tone to other instruments or other instruments to your tone as you build the song up, you'll find that things like delays and reverbs, particularly for your heavy rhythm sounds, become problematic. Particularly delays because they're time-based effects. So for me, I tend to just leave them out. So that means that helps make my rhythm playing more accurate, or helps me find the groove a little bit more, a little bit easier without hearing my slap back. So even with tap tempo, which is perhaps the greatest invention since sliced bread, really. So tap tempo is a wonderful thing, but even for rhythm tracks, tap tempo can create a bit of messiness in there. So okay, I have a very direct sound. I can hear where the sound is how it's being articulated from here, from my hands and from the guitar. If I add the delay in, as lovely as this delay is, it's going to add a bit of softness to that, and the rhythmic impetus is going to be lost. So for me, I tend to leave that out. I tend to use delays more for the melodic aspect of things, and also for chords that tend to float, or long type chords, chords that float over a bar or don't have such a strong rhythmic impetus behind them. Cubase is loaded with effects such as time-based delays that are going to lock into the tempo of your track, as well as reverbs, choruses, and pretty much anything you can imagine. So recording dry is probably a great way to go from that perspective anyway. When it comes to mixing, you'll really notice the difference. Talking about delays and time-based delays and that, using that dry track allowed me to actually use that tone for the basic rhythm bed when playing the bigger chords as well. So the chorus chords were still being used with this big open dry sound, which has added a great sort of foundation for the track. The further I went, and when I started layering different tracks on top of the big heavy tracks to create some more texture and dynamics, that's when I started using slightly less dirty sounds and using things like choruses and delays and that type of thing. Again, I tap tempo my delays in there, and also, you know, if I'm blending reverbs, which I tend to not do too much, I would, particularly if layering tracks, the more that you add those reverbs and delays, the messier it can potentially get. But when you've got long, almost synth-like chords, that's when I sort of tend to use effects. So that next section of the song, it almost has like a fusion type element to it after all the big heavy riffing, and it has a chorus and a delay on there, and playing some major 9 chords adds to that lovely sound as well. So I've used the middle pickup for this particular chord sequence up on the higher chords, and a bit of delay and a bit of tremolo there, but literally I just play the chords once and they'd hold. 2 bars each, going up, minor third, same chord, up to my key center again, up to D. They're all major 9 voicings, or thereabouts. There's no third actually in those. So major third, major 9, no third. So those layered on top of these really clean up those big dirty chords there, particularly when you're starting to layer some different intervals in there apart from fourths and fifths, and putting sevenths in there, some third intervals in there, create a lot of overtones when you're using distortion. So having those the 9s stacked on top there and with the major 7 tend to really space out and clean up those voicings and create a lovely broad sound. So not too much gain on, you don't have, if you keep layering gain on top of gain, it just ends up being a very compressed, non-dynamic mess, and that's something I've always really try to avoid. So if you're stacking guitars, keep layering them and adjusting your gain structures as you go. Talk about gain and having too much gain or too little gain, how it can affect your overall dynamics and the compressed nature of the sound. A high gain sound is naturally very compressed by its nature. When I recorded the solo for this tune, I just couldn't get enough gain, so I went the other way. So what I used was a VST plugin to give it its extra sort of zest. I wanted it to sound like the amp was on fire and just about to blow up, and I feel quite confident I got that effect. It's a very metallic sound, and particularly with the double stops. These double stops that are a staple in any rock guitar player's arsenal of licks is getting that interval to slightly oscillate creates almost like a screaming effect. And when you put octafuzzes like this guy here, that slight oscillation there makes it sound like it's on fire and it's about to blow up. So when I recorded the solo for this one, I was really going for that intent, but I didn't want to use the octafuzz again because it is a little bit of a crutch for me. I do love it so much and use it wherever I can. So what I did was use the VST plugin on my already very gainy and very distorted sound from my Marshall. And yeah, the effect was very pleasing for me. It got what I got the sound that I was hearing in my head. This track, as previously discussed, I spent a lot of time trying to build up the harmony, the rhythm and my rhythm tones for it. Then one of the first things I do when the melody starts is stop playing. So my rhythm, from a rhythm track perspective. So really when the melody starts for this song, all you're hearing is drums, bass and the melody. And the reason I do that is to create a nice dynamic shift in the song. So you have all this muscle and fire and everything happening at the very start of the tune, and then the melody comes forth and is just as strong but in a different way. And that can't be achieved if you're constantly sort of layering, or for me anyway, constantly layering heavy guitars in your rhythm tracks and then putting melody guitars on top of that and then clean guitars again on top of that. Makes it really difficult to get, again, this dynamic range. So dynamics is something that's very important to me in my tunes when I'm writing chord progressions and melodies.